So I'm back to about 1737. Anybody in here got their family history traced back that far? Back to 1750 or so? Because dates get to be real interesting and records get to be real interesting, trying to find them. Because they can be pretty overwhelming sometimes. So yeah, we put name tags out there because I always like to know who's who, so we can talk to each other by first names with the group. So what we're going to do with these name tags is after the meeting today, if it's okay with Jessica, I'll leave them with Jessica again, and she'll hang on to them so that our next meeting they'll be on the table. You just grab your name tag again and put it up for the group. Does that sound okay with everybody?
Groovy.
Okay. So I've had one person that has told me they cannot make the first Tuesday of the month. They're in another organization that meets on the first Tuesday of the month, and they're requesting that we move the meetings, if we can, to a different day of the month. So Jessica has some options, I think, with the library or not, or?
We just definitely, Thursdays are not very good, and Fridays are very wishy-washy on things happening in the meeting room.
Okay.
And the second Tuesday and the fourth Wednesday are not very good. Or second Monday, excuse me.
How about Wednesday?
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 The first Wednesday seems like there's not anything.
How about earlier in the day? Is that weird?
Yeah, I wouldn't be able to come.
Yeah, I'm happily retired, so I can do whatever I want.
So I lost you here. So do we want to meet earlier in the day, or we can't? meet
No,
earlier?
I'm saying, is that an option?
Oh,
Yeah, Jessica, what's earlier in the day on Tuesday, for example?
Oh, we could do an early in the day, but then you're going to run into people who work or
Yeah.
so. I would recommend, if we can, to keep it in the evening, just so there's more
So
people
what about
are able
Wednesday
to
at
attend.
5:30?
You like the first Wednesday
Yeah.
Yeah.
instead of the first Tuesday.
would that work with
Would that work,
everybody's
everybody?
schedule?
Yep, as far as I know, yeah.
Okay, so we'll try to go with the first Wednesday, if that's okay with you, Jessica, in the library.
Yep.
That'll make this person happy.
Same time, 5:30
Yeah,
to 7.
Same time, okay, 5:30 to 7?
And I will double check the calendar before we leave.
Okay. So the other thing is, I just called this thing starting off here, the Mountain Home Family History Group. Let's see if this thing corresponds. Doesn't look like it is. I had it working earlier, trust me. Here, try this. Same thing. All right, there we go. I apologize because this is very hard to see. I made it a little bit too small on the slides.
Just a little.
Just a little.
Wow.
So I just want to go over the difference between family history and genealogy with everybody.
Binoculars.
So family history basically focuses on stories connected with your family. That's what the family history piece does. And then the genealogy stresses the data involved with that. So in other words, your relatives are born on this day, they died on this day at this place. That's all data, and that's what the genealogy aspect of it does. The same thing, it says family history is getting to know your ancestors through study and research of journals, articles, etc. Family history is about the stories, relationships, and lives, dates, and places. So when I gave my Civil War presentation to you, my family history story was Eli Sunderland and what he went through during the Civil War. Genealogy, once again, is about collecting the dates, places, and relations. So that's the basic difference in the two between genealogy and family history. So we could call ourselves the Mountain Home Family History Society, Family History Group, or we can call ourselves the Mountain Home Genealogy
You can
Group.
pass that around.
If there's anybody have any thoughts one way or the other, what you'd like to be called or whatever?
The place in Boise is DRC, Dead Relative Collectors.
Yeah, place of
Oh,
work is
that's
dead
so
relative
fun.
collectors. That's true.
Why don't you two decide? You're in charge.
I don't really care. I mean,
I don't care.
I like family history.
family history group.
Well, it's easier, people, when you say genealogy, they think you're doing wrong.
Yeah,
Well,
especially here in Idaho.
My aunt, who got me interested in genealogy, she did a terrific job on the Norwegian side of the family. She sent us, every single person, a 3-volume set. And it was the greatest cure for insomnia I have ever read. And it, like Terry was saying, it was nothing, most of it was, dates of birth, dates of death, who married who, and children. Well, that's great. But what I find interesting is this, as Paul Harvey would say, now you know the rest of the story.
Yeah.
I want to know the rest of the story. So for me, the rest of the story is much more interesting than just the facts. Yeah, the facts are important. But the family history, which I just finished a 7-year project on the Crown side of the family. Nobody had ever done it before. And I just finished it, and it took me 5 to 7 years to put it all together. But I wrote it in story form, and I sent it out to everybody, and you know what? Nobody went to sleep.
Well, it's
And
good
then-
to
and
know if
that's
the
the
guy was
thing.
a bank robber or a plumber
Yeah.
or a farmer or what they did, and if they were in the military and what they did. And that
My
kind of
aunt
thing.
told me it's important, documentation, 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 but also it's the story behind it. So I think you need to work on both to make it interesting to your reader.
Right.
Because what happened with my aunt was, the information she had was terrific, and it was 3 volumes. The only problem is, halfway through the first volume, and how good is that after a while? Because it's still sitting in my shelf in my office. I've got 2 shelves of genealogy stuff. And it doesn't do you any good. You start opening that volume, and halfway through you go to sleep. So what good does it do? So my feeling is you gotta do both.
Yeah. So I guess we're gonna stick with Mountain Home Family History Group. Is that okay with everybody?
Sounds good.
Okay, that's what we're doing.
All right, so we're dropping the genealogy part.
Well, it'll just be, the
In
name
the
will be
title.
Mountain Home Family History Group.
Yeah.
We'll do genealogy.
Now you
As part
back
of
it
that.
up with the
Yeah,
documentation,
yeah.
which is part of
Yeah,
the
yeah.
genealogy
Yeah.
part.
Yeah.
Was this being circulated for something?
I made I did that just so there's all kinds of
Yes.
wonderful information
Yeah.
and sites
Or we
on
can
the
get a copy
internet
of
for
this?
free that you can go to when you're doing your
Right.
family history.
Will we get a copy of this? Or?
Yeah, I'll make a copy, if
Okay.
Jessica could be so kind to make a copy of it.
How many do we need here?
How many is there?
Okay,
Thanks, Barb.
the format for the meetings, I thought would be about a half hour, maybe 45 minutes of me going over something, forms, records, websites, whatever it happens to be. Just kind of an educational thing. And then the rest of the time, we could do a family sharing. Somebody has something to share about their family. They've made a significant discovery, and they want to share it with the rest of the group. Or if somebody is stuck on a brick wall and they can't get around that brick wall, then everybody can go to work and try to help them, with the brick wall to try to solve that issue. Or just helping people with the genealogy, that you need to find people with. Does that format sound like a workable format with everybody to do? I mean, we're pretty flexible here, so whatever you want to do.
Sounds like a good place to start.
Okay, all right. So what I tell people is, you're gonna find when you, some of you have already experienced this, probably many of you have already experienced this, but you're gonna get all kinds of people wanting you to buy subscriptions to things, right? Spend your money, buy this cheat sheet, buy that thing, you know, buy this subscription. You don't have to really buy a whole lot to get started in family history. I've been able to do my family history research for these last 35 years, 40 years, and I've never bought a subscription to Ancestry, Family Search. I've never bought it as anything. I have spent money for sometimes on a national, on a record from the National Archives, but that's about it. Because usually you can find these websites and these helpful databases free somewhere, okay? So where you don't have to spend money. So, I mean, it's your money, you can spend it if you want to, you can buy these things, but I'm just saying you don't have to spend money to get going in family history information.
Okay, Terry, can I build on that?
Okay, good.
Okay, Terry was mentioning Ancestry, which is a fee charged. But you have the Bureau of Land Management, those are free records. Courthouses, you can call the courthouse, and they'll be more than happy in most places to look up information for you. Libraries are very, very helpful and very, very free. When I was doing my research on the Crones, I called several libraries and historical societies in Illinois, and they were more than happy to give me the information. Cemeteries, if you pull up Find a Grave, which is a free service.
What's it called?
Find a Grave.
I'll be covering that website next week, or I mean next month. Rather.
I mean, you can get sometimes you get lucky with that, sometimes you don't. But on because what people do is they'll go into cemeteries and they'll take pictures of the grave and they post it online. Now, sometimes they'll do a little more research and put the obituaries on there or history of the individuals. And that's all free. Historical societies. I called the Historical Society in Roundup, Montana to get information on my great-grandfather, and they are more than happy to give me information. Document, of course, ethnic societies. Some of you said you're Germans from Russia. You can call the Germans from Russia Center in Lincoln, Nebraska. They'll be more than happy to look stuff up for you. Also, there is a Germans from Russia Society in Portland, Oregon at Concordia University. And that's when I was doing a presentation several years ago on Germans from Russia. I lived in that place for about 4 days. And so that's all free. United States National Archives, the archives in Boise at the
Yeah, I think
Penn.
I may be covering
That's all
part of that
free.
tonight.
World War I museum, if you have relatives that fought in World War I, they will look up free stuff for you. There's the World War II museum in New Orleans, Louisiana. They will give you free information. All you can do is ask them for it. A couple things that you might want to know that I don't know if you heard or not. The 1890 census was basically destroyed in 1921 with some few exceptions. Also, if you have relatives that served in the Civil War, there's a unit history of every unit in Civil War, North and South. Not only is it on Wikipedia, but in most cases, there are actual places that actually have museums. For example, the 8th Illinois, there's I can't remember the guy's name, but anyway, he's the one that actually arrested Samuel Mudd. He was with the 8th Illinois. He's buried in Twin Falls. And when I contacted the people at the 8th Illinois Museum, she just about jumped through her skin. She couldn't figure out where this guy disappeared to. So there are ways to, to find things for free. And you've got Wikipedia. Wikipedia is a wonderful source. And then you have passenger ship records. You can get those online for free too. So there's all kinds of places you can go
There's a lot of free websites.
for free. So
Now, I gotta put a caveat though on the courthouse records, because when identity theft started coming out pretty hot and heavy, right, about, 1980s or late 80s, early 90s, the knee-jerk reaction to a lot of courthouses in the United States was that they sealed off records, especially if the records are more than 70 years old, I believe. And so there are states out there where you go into a county courthouse and you say, hey, I'm here, I'm doing family genealogy, and I'm looking for this guy, and they'll just sit there and look at you and say, sorry, can't do anything for you. Have a nice day.
Was that because there were so many requests they couldn't process them?
No, that's because they were trying to keep
Stealing
people from
identities.
stealing information, so they could use it fraudulently.
They could
Yeah.
get someone's social security checks and all kinds of things.
Yeah.
for example, the state of Washington, I could not get my grandfather's birth certificate from Yakima, Washington because of that.
I had South Dakota just tell me right up front, sorry, can't help you out.
Isn't there a workaround, or if you got a,
Fortunately, in a
Subpoena.
lot of those states, there are workarounds. South Dakota had some excellent resources at one of the university's research libraries. They had a lot of records there that I could glean a lot of information out of. So yeah, usually there's something in those states that'll help you out with something. So just be aware, you can't always just walk into a courthouse and get information, because some of them won't let you.
Well, I tell you one thing, Montana will be more than happy to show you where to go look up. If you go to, because I went to Billings, I went to Roundup, I went to Helena, and all you have to do is walk in the door, and they'll be more than happy. I think, you're right, it depends on the state territory.
Yeah.
But in Montana, I mean, they were just happy as all could be to help. So it does depend on the state, but Montana is extremely helpful.
And don't get me wrong though, because courthouse records are some of your most valuable records. I'm sure you all know that, that you're gonna find. They're courthouse records. So by all means, you want to check it out and see if you can. I was doing research in Kansas, trying to find a marriage certificate for one of my relatives, and I called up the county courthouse where they were supposed to have gotten married, and they tell me, oh, I'm sorry, our records aren't here. And I'm going, what do you mean your records aren't there? He goes, yeah, they're over at the Spencer Research Library on the University of Kansas in Lawrence, and you have to go there. And so what I found out from that experience was that a lot of these county courthouses, they don't have the means to preserve these records. And so what they're doing is they're turning them over to research libraries that can preserve the records and still have it available to the public. So I stopped into Lawrence, Kansas at the university there, and went to the research library, and sure enough, I found all the information I needed to find. It was right there. But, so it's best to call ahead to see if they actually have the records, before you make a trip to Kansas and then find out they don't.
Well, I gotta say that boots on the ground is very, very important.
what do you think the average price is, on TV they have, they research different stars where they originated from. So they go and they do the whole genealogy for them, back as far as they can go.
Genealogists will charge you anywhere from $100 an hour up.
Yeah, it just depends.
Now,
I just don't know if I trust all the information from them myself.
I'll pass some of this stuff around. Most of this stuff I got for free off the internet. Now, my family, the Cronk family, is all basically Montana. So most of this, for example, the history in Garfield County, which is where my great uncle homesteaded, I've got some really great information there. I've got off of Ancestry, I've got my great-great-grandmother's passenger list. I've got an example of Find a Grave, and I've got some other stuff you want to look at. It'll help clear things up.
Seems like a lot of tenacious digging.
Yeah, like I said, it took me 7 years to, not 7 years, consistently, but it took about 7 years to put all this story together.
How many hours? Like tens of hundreds.
I have
Once
three
you get
big,
it, you get the bug and then you time doesn't matter.
I have 3 big binders in my office of just the Crone family
Only 3?
history. That doesn't count the Greb family, which is my grandmother's on my mother's side, and the Mazers, which is my grandfather on my mother's side. My mother's side is both Germans from Russia, so I'm just now starting on that. Which I have a distinct disadvantage because nobody is alive on either side of the family.
There's a joke out there about getting locked in the county courthouse overnight, and you don't even know it. They open the doors the next morning and you're in there working on genealogy. Okay, let's move it on here. Recording of facts. As Frank was saying, the saying in genealogy is if you don't have it documented, you don't have it recorded, you basically have mythology, because you don't have any facts to support, what you're putting down. So you need to describe wherever your place is by the date and the place and the details. Now, as you guys know, counties and state boundaries have changed over time, right? And so your relative could be listed in this particular document as living in Putnam County, and then the next document you look at, he's living in Goodland County, and then the next document you look at, he's living in another county.
And he never moved.
And he never moved, okay? It's just that the county boundaries changed, and so you gotta keep that in your mind as to what's going on. Now, there is a program out there that's free. It's called mapofus.org. Probably right now. www.mapofus.org. What this program will allow you to do is you can feed in a point or a location, and then you can either select the years one by one, or you can put a video thing that's kind of a loop that goes through the whole match of census. But it'll show you how the county boundary lines have changed over time. And that may affect where your ancestor may have lived, because, like I say, you may be looking in the wrong county at the wrong time. You know what I'm saying? Whereas if you look in the other county, he might be listed in the other county where they might be living.
Jerry, you are so right, because when I started, because my family spent 10 years in Missouri, and they were in 3 different places. Well, to get the county records, I had to go back and figure out which county in Missouri they were in at a particular time, because when Missouri was first formed, they had 4 counties. Now they have like 40 counties. And so trying to get records from the right county at the right time really made it difficult. So yeah, you're right, Terry. It really is it's important to find out which county you're looking at.
Yeah,
And they did change
during that time period anyway. Of course, your facts must be unambiguous. Now, I know that sounds kind of funny, right? Unambiguous, but hog holler, could be over several different counties. You know what I mean? So it's important that you try to define where exactly that location was at.
Of course, then in Central Europe, between 1600 and about 1850. The borders of the countries changed about every 35 seconds. I mean, I'm of German heritage, and I had to get up. I have a book on German history, which really helped me. But the borders of Germany, and of course, Germany wasn't always just Germany either. So, you know, things changed over the years. So if you're going back, you know, beyond, say, 1800 in Europe, you have to be real aware of what the boundaries of different countries were at the time. So you have to also learn European history.
These are some good date formats to use in genealogy.
Very important.
You can either use the conventional format that everybody's used to, April 1st, 2018, or you can put the day in front of the month, 2018. I do mine in this format, but that's just my personal preference or choice. I usually put a 0 in front of any ones, just because I know then that it's the 1st and not the 11th or the 21st or some number that's missing. But again, you can do this any way you guys want to. And then 1 April 2018. Now, my computer program that I use, when I put this date in, it always drops to 0. So it doesn't matter if I put it in there or not.
But the
it
important
always
thing
drops.
about dates is on April 1st, if you write 1/4 or 4/1, it can go from January 4th to April 1st.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's very important to write the dates.
Yeah.
What's the difference between the two look the same?
Which one?
April, the second and third one look the same.
This one's the April. This is just abbreviation for April,
Oh,
APR.
okay.
That's what I use. I just use an abbreviation, 3 digits, APR. Again, it's your documentation, so you can do it any way you like, whatever floats your boat.
Would you say it's easier to start with like a marriage license?
With a what?
Marriage license to
What do you
get the
mean?
ball going? It's like, where do you even start?
It's just start by your mom and dad and your grandparents.
Yeah, we'll
And all you
get,
can know about them.
we'll get that. We'll get there in just a little bit here, but yeah.
Or if you're like me, all I had to start with, this is a picture of my great-great-grandfather and great-great-grandmother. That's all I had to start with, was a picture
And their names.
and their names. And I still can't figure out, my great-great-grandmother's name was Wilhelmina, but she went by Fanny. And I have yet to figure out why she went by Fanny.
I know a lot of my German ancestors have 4 names. 2 middle names.
Oh, don't even get me started on Germans and Johann. Oh my God, especially the Germans from Russia.
So here's a good place format. You start with the city and the township, if you know that. Anybody know how big a township is traditionally?
How big is the township?
No.
Usually it's 6 miles by 6 miles. So that's 36 square miles is a normal township, particularly in the western part of the United States. So you write the city, the township, and then the county. Now, me, I'm kind of anal because let's say I have a township, I'll call it Bruno Township, and then a county, let's say Jackson. And I usually write county behind it. And then the state, whatever the state is. And I abbreviate that 2 digits, California, Idaho, ID, whatever. The reason I write county is because sometimes you'll see stuff like this. Bruno, Jackson, California. Okay, is this the city and this a township? You know what I mean? So just to clarify it for me, I usually put the word county in there, just so I know that it's Jackson County. Then whatever's over here is either a city. I've also seen places that Deer Creek, Middletown Heights, Clayton County, Iowa,
So it'd be Mountain Home, Elmore.
Idaho.
Yeah,
I skip township, I don't do township.
Okay,
But I
so-
just do city, county, and state.
so it's however you want to do it there.
But you can, doing this on the computer, I would think a lot of that would be amended. You wouldn't have to worry about county if you just punched in the date.
Oh, your computer program will tell you right away. Yeah, because, I mean, I've had it say, Salem was not a county in, 1835.
Right.
And so, yeah, it'll keep you straight, if you have one. If you're
You can
using
go into the weeds pretty fast on this project.
Yeah, oh, the other thing with this is, does everybody know the difference between meets and bounds and the grid system?
What do you call it, meets and bounds?
Meets and bounds. Now, I'm sure everybody's heard of meets and bounds.
No.
If you've done any research on family, you're bound to run into meets and bounds. Meets and bounds sound something like this. Starting at the large oak tree at Grist Mill, run north 230 feet, and then make a right turn over to Salem Creek for 400 yards, and then follow the road down, blah, blah, blah.
That's the way I give
And
directions.
then they'll say, more or less containing 40 acres, whatever it happens to be. But that's meets and bounds. Now, the grid system is one of the systems that George Washington brought into existence with grids, and I know you know that one. It's like the northern half of the northwest section of, range 25, blah, blah, blah. But that's the difference in meets and bounds and grids. Grid section is, as far as defining an area, is better because there's only one spot on Earth that has those grid coordinates, or that place. Meets and bounds, sometimes it gets kind of gray where, is this section in that or not? It can get kind of hairy, but you're gonna run into meets and bounds when you start doing wills and you get into wills of your ancestors and look at who inherited what, and because they cover all this in the wills, So I just wanted to cover that with you, let you know what the difference was there. Okay, we have to develop some kind of an organizational system here. You're gonna have to find one that makes sense. One of the problems I have with records is, let's say I have my 5th great-grandfather's will, okay? Okay, when you go to file that will, do I put that under my 5th great-grandfather's name? Or do I come up with a system where I'm filing wills? I have a whole file of wills, and then I give this will a classification of some number? Or, how am I gonna identify this document so that when I wanna come back to it in the future, how can I find it? Okay. Now, there is a software program out there called Clues. Costs about 30, 40 bucks, I don't know, somewhere in there. That's how it's spelled, C-L-O-O-Z. You can look it up on your own and get home or whatever. Clues is a indexing program for genealogical records. The problem is with it, you have to take all your records and lay them out, like all my wills here, all my census records here, all these piles, and then start indexing them into the program, which, it just takes a while to do. The other thing is, it can become just as much work putting information into Clues, because you can tie all kinds of links with people and records and everything into it. So I I just use it as an indexing program, so I can store my photographs, I can store my documents, and keep everything straight, I can find things. But you don't have to buy it, it's just a recommendation to look at. But you need to come up with some type of organizational system.
Is that 30 or 40 a month?
No, it's a one-time fee. The software, I'll tell you right now, software programs for genealogy run anywhere between $29 and $55. So they're not that expensive, one-time fee. You buy it one time. I would recommend that if you're looking at any software programs, to hold off until about Thanksgiving or the holidays, because they tend to have a lot of discounted sales, usually as much as 50% off of their software during those times, during the holiday season. But if you want to buy a software program, buy a software program. You know, you have to find a software program that you are going to like, okay? I get asked that all the time. What's the best software program to use? Well, that's like asking, where's the best place to go on vacation? Everybody's got a different. Some people like to go water skiing. Some people like to go snow skiing. Some people like to go to the mountains. Some people like to go to the beach. So these software programs are all different, and you just have to find what you're going to like. Now, what I recommend if you want to check out software programs is to go to the Family History Center at the LDS Church in Boise. You've been there, haven't you, Pat?
Many times.
And they have, I know they have 4 major ones. They've got Legacy Family Tree, they've got Roots Magic, Family Search, and Ancestral Quest are the 4 that I know that they have, that you can actually open them up, look at screens, see how to do information on them, and kind of check them out before you actually spend money.
Don't you have to be a member
No.
to access it? No?
No. And they don't preach to you, and they don't invite you to church, and they don't do any religion stuff.
Yeah.
They just help you with genealogy. They're
Yeah.
not, because I'm not LDS, I was raised Catholic. And when I first went there, I was scared, and I thought, oh my God, they're gonna try to get me to go to their church.
Baptize you for the
Yeah,
man.
yeah, try to get me to go to church, and they didn't.
Yeah.
And they really are.
It's,
And there was a group here in Mountain Home at the church here that did genealogy, but when COVID happened, they closed, and they haven't opened yet, so.
they may reopen, I don't know. I was talking to them at the LDS Center in Boise, and I don't know, we'll see. But yeah, if you want to check Drive computer software programs, I would check them out. They have some of the major programs there.
What about Boise City Library?
What about it?
Do they have those programs?
Yeah.
Boise City has Heritage,
They have databases.
and then they have
But
what
they-
they call the Idaho Room. And if you're doing research for anything in Idaho, it's a really good resource, but it's called the Idaho Room. But you do have to make a reservation ahead of time because it is locked.
But they don't have any genealogy software that you can check out. But the LDS Church is the only one I know that has them, where you could go physically put your hands on, see if you like it or not. Now, it's at the Family History Center. It's on Cole.
Colin Overland,
Yeah.
between the Mormon church and the temple. And you go between the 2 buildings and through the parking lot and kind of zigzag through the parking lot, way to the end of the parking lot.
Yeah. So I'll be talking a little bit about more of what some of the stuff they have to offer, but anyway, for what it's worth. Anyway, you have to be able to maintain it. I don't think this thing's working anymore. Oh, there we go. That accommodates all record types, and it says consider genealogy software. I will cover genealogy software at some point, but it'll be down the road a little bit for people. So let's get on here to basic recording tools. First ones are pedigree charts. Why don't you go ahead and hand out?
I think we made some photocopies of that.
Yeah. Why don't you hand out the? We're going to give you about 5 copies of pedigree charts here. So with a pedigree chart is going to start with a person. Usually when you're beginning, you use you. And then it traces back throughout history, back different generations. Your father, your mother, their father, mothers, and so forth, as it goes back in time. We also have family group records, which when you're working with just an individual family, husband, wife, and then the kids, okay? That's a family group record. And then we have descendancy lists. Descendancy lists start with somebody back in time, and it comes forward in time to the present. And I'm going to show you examples of these right now. Again, I apologize because it's pretty small writing. This is an example of a pedigree chart. The primary person on this chart is right here. And so all these other people on the chart are all her ancestors on the chart. So here's that person, states when she was born, where she was born, the place that she was married, and where the place she was married at. She's not dead yet, so that's still blank. And then her spouse actually goes, normally, this one is right here, William Walter Wayner, right here is her spouse. But usually they're here, or they'll put them at the bottom of the chart, something like that. Because the purpose for this chart is not pertaining to the spouse or the spouse's family, it's pertaining to this individual. So, up on top here is her father, and down here is her mother. And so all of these people up here on the top portion of this pedigree chart are her dad's line, or her dad's people. And then down here, this is her mother, so all these people on the bottom of this chart are the dad's people. Or I'm sorry, the mother's person, people, going back. And that's basically how it works. Now, normally, I think in our example, there's a number where usually it's located right up here in the upper right. It says a chart number, and it'll say this person is this. Here it says it on this one. Person number 1 is the same as person number whatever on another chart. So you can continue when you get to this generation. The next generation would go on another chart and go on back and further back. So this is basically one of the first charts you probably want to start to try to fill in and get as much information as you can on it. There's also usually a place on this particular chart, it's got the compiler name here, so that if anybody wants to have a question on this chart, if they're looking at it, a family history reunion or something like that, they know who to contact that made the chart, what's going on.
Why is that important?
Just if they have information they want to get a hold of.
Oh.
Or they say, no, this isn't right, you know.
And they want to dispute it, then they talk to you and you say, I have documentation to prove I'm
Yeah.
right.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Now these pedigree charts, they're you can get them in a 3-generation chart, a 4-generation chart, a 5-generation chart, a 6-generation chart, and that's about the most I've seen is a 6-generation chart. If you're dealing with a 6th-generation chart, as you notice on the side over here, the information gets very minimal because there's no space to put it down. You just run out of writing space on it. So any questions on the pedigree chart? No? All
My
right.
only comment is, you gotta use the pedigree chart, otherwise you're just gonna have a bunch of jumbled notes all over the place.
Yeah,
And it's just gonna make it very, very, very difficult too. Because when
Yeah.
I first started, I didn't use the pedigree chart. I had notes everywhere and it was just so confusing and so complicated that then I realized that I needed to do the chart and it made it much easier. So use the chart, you can save yourself a whole lot of grief.
But, it says chart number when you go to another chart,
Uh-huh.
which is the first name on the beat you go to.
so let me see exactly where you're looking at so I can.
Now, one thing you gotta know
And start
about
with my name.
Germans,
But when I start the next.
you go back to, because I traced my family back to 1550.
Well, it depends on any one of these.
And
Oh,
the
okay.
thing is, you have to remember,
So
There's
you
a lot of
put that
German
person down here,
traditions
and
that
then
you're not
continue
aware
your
of.
chart, going on back.
for example,
So what you want,
German tradition has the firstborn male
okay, and then your dad
is
is,
always named after the father.
and then.
So I'm actually Frank the
Father's here and
Sixth,
his mother's here.
because I went to Twin Falls and got the international ancestry, and I traced it back to 1550. It drove me crazy, because every one I ran into was Frederick. And the only way I could keep it straight was by the wife's name.
Find grave, you know.
So, but again, see, that's as far back as you can go if you're not royalty. If you're royalty, you can go all the way back to, you know, when. But, and that's one of those unique German traditions. Another one with Germans is they like to name their first males Johann. It's always the middle name that they go by. Especially with Germans from Russia, the firstborn males are always Johann, and they went by their middle name.
It sounds like some countries that everybody's named Mohammed.
Yeah,
Very
same
popular
thing.
name.
When I was doing some work on Germans from Russia in my family, I started finding all my relatives that were born in Russia was Johann. I didn't know, you know, I kept looking for like Wesley or Henry or, you know, whatever. And it was always Johann, and it took me about 10 minutes to figure out that. So those are just some of those idiotic things that you learn through trial and error when you're doing this. So a lot of it is just good detective work too.
So we're gonna move on
I'll
here,
let Terry go on.
and we're gonna go to the family group sheet. The family group sheet is probably gonna be one of your most used sheets that you're gonna use in family history research. So basically, if you notice this family group, this is the father, this is the mother, and then these are the children. They only had 2 children, and that's why she only put 2 in the thing down here.
I don't think we got that. Did we get that one?
No, you didn't get this exact form, so,
Got this one.
it's similar.
Yeah, husband
Yeah.
and wife.
Right, so you guys got
Starts
this
with
one.
husband in the top left
Right.
corner.
Yeah.
Right, the husband goes here, and then the wife's information goes here, and then the kids start being listed down here, okay? And then over on this side, you would list if the kid is a male or a female. And then what I usually do for my direct line ancestors is, I put an asterisk mark over here on the left margin. That way I can identify that this kid is my direct ancestor in the line. Other people they just highlight them, highlight that kid, and they recognize that that's their direct line. So notice though that there's only room for 11 kids. I had a great grandfather that had 17 kids, one by one person and then 5 or 6 by another, okay? So the 11 went on this sheet, but when he married the other person, then that begins a new family group record because those children are with another woman here. Now, if you have a family that maybe they've had 15 kids, okay, same husband and wife, right, had 15 kids. You can work kids, the continuation kids, a couple different ways. The way I do it is I grab another sheet like this and I fill out the husband's name and the wife's name, and I usually put the birth and the death date, or at least the birth and death dates on them. And then I would number these as 12, 13, 14, 15, whatever, the kids. But I need to put the names on there so that, and the dates, so that I have that family correct. Because you're going to run into families where John and Mary, and then their kids, John and Mary. so to make sure you got the right ones, you want to make sure you put the right dates on there for them. They do make continuation sheets or extension sheets. They're called family group extension sheets that just have kids on it and no parents. And that's just another option. I always like to just grab another one, put the wife and husband up there, and then put the kids down below it, staple them together, try not to lose them. Now, as time has gone on over the years, people have wanted to know more information about people. And that's one of these sheets. So they've got occupation up here, they've got DNA information, let's see, baptisms, confirmations. So they've added more and more. The LDS Church even has more because they have all the LDS church information that they want to record as well. So the sheet that I gave you is a probably 20 years old sheet, but I still use it because that's what I use. But you can get newer sheets if you would like. Search the internet, you can find with more information if you want more information on your family group records. But this is one of the most often used sheets in family history.
Well, how would you Google that particular site for free
Just say
PDF?
genealogy forms.
Genealogy.
Yeah.
Like Frank was saying about the Johan thing, my relatives are from Ireland. And when you have a husband or wife, your first son is named after your oldest brother. Your second son is named after your father. The third son is named after the dad himself. And then after that, you can name your kids whatever you want. So every family's got a William, a Walter, and a Alexander. And so all the cousins are the same names, and all the brothers are the same names, and everybody's got the same names. So you gotta figure out who's who.
Yeah.
And that's when dates become very important.
And one man married a lady named Sarah, somebody else named a lady named Elizabeth. You gotta put them in the right family because they're both Roberts or they're both.
So you could color code it too.
There were a couple of Civil War veterans in Oregon that were married when they went to war, had several kids. When they came home, they left their wife and they got married and had another family, and he named the same kids, the name of the same kids. There were 3 families from this one guy. All the kids were the same name from 3 different wives.
Wow.
That way he wouldn't forget.
That's enough to pull your hair out.
Hey, you know, I started with a full head of hair, okay?
Yeah.
Okay, this is a family group sheet. I'm just going to pass it around because it's too difficult to see. This is actually one of my relatives. So you got the husband's name information up here, the wife, and then the children's names down here. They decided to put male and female over in this box over here, which is a drop-down menu. And then on the back side is an example of what I was saying about more kids. They had 3 more kids, so I put the husband and the wife up here. and their information to keep the kids straight. Now, another thing that you'll find on that family group record is I call it a fag number. And I don't mean a cigarette, and I don't mean a gay person, okay? It's F-A-G. Now, we're going to talk about Find a Grave, which is a website you guys already talked about a little bit. I'm going to cover that next month. But Find a Grave has become so popular in genealogy work today that a lot of people record every grave that's in Find a Grave has a memorial ID number to it, and so they're even in computer programs. There's a space now for Find a Grave memorial ID number, and you can write the number in there, and then when you're doing your genealogy program, you can just click on that number. It'll open up Find a Grave, and it'll pull up that web page for you, so you can see that person's grave, where it is. But that's what I meant by the FAG number that's on the sheets there, going around. All right. I think we got one more. Oh, that's the. So here's the descendancy list. So here, once again, this is starting back way in time and coming forward. So here's the descendant himself. Notice they're on the very far left of the sheet over here. And then you see these twos. That means the second generation. There's a 2 down here. That's second generation. And then if you have a 3 over here, then that's the 3rd generation from this person. And that's a descendancy list. So it tells you the descendants of this individual person up there. And I don't know if you've seen those before, but those are pretty popular with genealogists as well. A lot of software programs will have that built in automatically.
So that sheet of yours that you're passing around, was that printed from your genealogy program?
No, actually, okay. There's about, besides the LDS library in Salt Lake City, there are other very important genealogy libraries around the country. One, believe it or not, is in San Francisco at the major library in San Francisco. I can't remember the name of it. The San Francisco Library. Pretty popular, pretty well known. Anyway, that's one. In Fort Wayne, Indiana, is the it's not Mid-Continent. Allen County Public Library. They have a huge genealogy section there. Kansas City, Missouri or Independence, Missouri has the Mid-Continent Library. The Mid-Continent Library has free genealogy forms that are fillable. So you can go on there, download the form, type your information into it, save it as whatever, and then you can print it out or whatever, and that's what that one's Mid-Continent Library.
So they don't have the woman's native or maiden name.
It should
What's
be.
on there?
I just see Harriet Robbins married to William Robbins.
I don't know where you're, on the bottom of the kids.
Oh, these are the kids here?
The kids are at the bottom, mom and dad are the 2 top ones.
Oh,
So
okay.
you see Emily Hastings?
Oh, okay, there we
The
go.
way I do it, I don't even mess with the married names on married women, because I know what it is. In that case, it's Robbins,
Right,
right?
yeah.
So I just put her maiden name
Oh, okay.
down there, is the way I usually work it. All right, we gotta get cracking here a little bit. How to proceed. Of course, the golden rule in genealogy is we start with what we know and we work backwards, right? So as they were talking earlier, begin with yourself or another designated person and start working backwards. Talk to anybody that's still existing in your family that you know of. See what information you can glean from other family members. Record family stories if you've got family stories. Because you never know what you glean, what kind of information you'll glean off of a family story somewhere. How much of the information can you prove? And once again, try to document all your sources of information. When possible, 2 or more sources should appear to support a fact, and document before you try to move on. Common mistakes. Don't trust everything you see online. I'm sure you've probably run into that before. I had a relative I was working on that I know for a fact that the husband died back in Pennsylvania and the wife is buried out in South Dakota. And this person said that the wife was buried next to the husband in Pennsylvania. And the only reason was, well, he's buried there, so the wife's got to be buried there too. No, that doesn't work. So, you know, you got to take some stuff with a grain of salt, what you find. Don't make assumptions.
Although if you're the one doing all the work, you can embellish some of the stories.
Yeah, you
That's
can.
not.
Yeah, but you gotta back it up with documentation.
Who's gonna question it?
Or if you're not sure, you can always say, I think this is the case because the Crones spent 3 years in Illinois. I cannot find any actual documentation as to actually where they were in Illinois, except that there was a marriage certificate with my great aunt, but that was it. But I couldn't find any other proof of my great grandparents other than that. And so when I sent the report to the rest of my family, I said, I believe that they were either in this place or this place, because I know that at that time German immigrants tended to go places that had other German immigrants. So it's either one of 3 places. So if you're going to do that, you need to be sure that, you know, if you're not sure about something, you just say you think this is the case.
So beware of name issues, same name, spelling variants, name changes, that sort of stuff.
Can I tell them a story, Terry?
Okay.
When I was, because my great-great-grandfather had 2 homesteads, one in Washington and one in Montana. So I go to the BLM records, spell out Crone, can't find it. So I start doing variations of the spelling. And sure enough, I put an H in the middle, K-R-O-H-N-E. And sure enough, I had the 2 homesteads. But, so you have to play with the spelling, because somewhere along the line in the records, and I've heard stories that my great-grandfather was kind of a character, and so it's very possible that he may have tried to slip in a second homestead without nobody knowing. But anyway, so that's just one of the things. If you can't find something, yeah, it's a good idea to play with the spelling a bit.
And, you know, everybody's been told that, well, when they came through Ellis Island, people's names got changed. That really isn't true. I mean, Ellis Island had translators, you know, there, and they made particular detailed attention to how people spelled their name and talked to these people. So, you know, I wouldn't believe that their name was changed at Ellis Island.
I know my grandparents changed it when they
Yeah.
came, yeah.
Yeah, now that's real. People change their
My
names.
grandfather was
Yeah.
H-E-R-R-M-A-N-N, and he dropped an R and an N,
Yeah.
because it was more American looking.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
My theory on Ellis Island is you came on a ship, you're on a ship for 2 weeks, you got a head cold, you speak a foreign language, you got a heavy accent, and you can't read or write. So you get to the man, you say, my name is Howard Rezenkowitz. and they write down whatever they hear. And you can't say, oh, no, that's not an E, that's an A. That's not an I, that's an E over here. And you can't correct them, so you get whatever the man hears, whatever he writes down. And you got a heavy accent and a head cold, so,
Yeah.
you know.
Well, for example, you all know who George Armstrong Custer is.
Mhm.
Originally, Custer was his family was from Germany, and when he came over here, his father, it was spelled K-U-S-T-R. His father changed it to C-U-S-T-R because it sounded more American. So that's just, again, another example of them playing games with spelling to make it sound more American.
H-E-R-R-M-A-N-N.
We talked about borders changing before, poor quality of handwriting in old scripts. You ran into time problems or calendar problems with the
They probably-
Julian calendar.
Yeah, they probably also have an app for that. I bet if you took a picture of handwriting that you couldn't read, you think there's an app out there that could say, oh, that says.
I worked at the base hospital and read doctor's writing for 20 years, so
Yeah.
I can figure out pretty much anything.
I don't know of any apps. I know there are people out there that are trained in like Old German script, because Old German script is really, really hard for anybody to read. And these people are familiar with it and they can decipher it pretty well. But I don't really know of any apps that can do that. For
You want to see an example of old German script? Here. That's my great-great-grandfather's,
Oh, nice.
their wedding certificate.
Yeah, I've seen that kind of.
So when
That
you
was
get
quite
back
elegant back
in your
then.
family history research, when you get back to like 1750, you're gonna see a little bit change in dating. When the British government finally accepted the Gregorian calendar, they didn't accept it until 1752, even though it was out in 1562, I think.
It's beautiful.
Yeah,
It's beautiful.
and,
I can
but they
do
dropped
that.
10 days from the calendar. And so you'll even run across some records that say 12 June, 1751, and then it'll say OS behind it. And then, but that meant it was the old system of dating as compared to the new system of dating. A good example that I can think of that you can see online is Thomas Jefferson's tombstone, because it's got his birth date on there with an OS behind it, and then his death date with no OS, or they would call it old system, new system, but after that date, it was all new system, so it didn't really matter. But take a look at just Google Thomas Jefferson's tombstone.
And also for you that are Norwegian, there's old Norwegian and there's new Norwegian, and they're totally different. That changed about, as I remember, about 1800.
And Pennsylvania Dutch people aren't Dutch, they're German.
So, and it's totally different, so.
And
If
then
you
the
go to
Quakers-
Norway and try to find, your relatives prior to 1800, you gotta
Yeah.
make that switch.
What's Quaker dating?
Quaker dating is, they would say the 15th day of the 10th month. Now, depending on the time frame, you have to understand that the older Julian calendars, the year actually started the 25th of March. So the first month was April. So if you're working off of that calendar, the 10th month would be almost February of the following year, depending on the day. But the Quaker dating is just the month and the day. The 10th, they used numbers. They didn't use the March, April, or May or anything. They just used numbers. That was Quaker dating on there. All right.
So right now, we're on the 6th day of the 6th month of 2022.
7th day.
Oh, 7th.
7th day of 6th month.
Yeah.
The right example.
Okay, I think we'll stop there. If anybody's got any questions. About the only other thing I was going to cover was the Family Search website. Has everybody been to Family Search? website. Okay, Family Search is the LDS Church's website. See if I can get rid of all of this.
At first, when that first came out, it was only available to LDS people. And then when it became available to everybody else, they told me, and I got on, and I've been on ever since.
So how do we find it? Family Search LDS?
Right on your
It's on the
paper.
thing.
It's
Oh,
on your paper.
there we go.
Nancy,
If
it's
you
on your
just put
paper.
family search,
Look at the bottom.
Oh, there we go. Thank you.
FamilySearch.org. I'll see if it would go there. Now, the 1950 federal census was just released about a month ago. And so genealogists all over the country are excited about the 1950 census and being able to try to find their ancestors in the 1950 census.
Jeez, that means I'm an ancestor.
So let me just explain censuses to you.
Can you
The
make
US
sense out of
government-
it? Sorry.
Yeah, the US government started documenting their citizens in 1790. And the first federal census was in 1790. And then they did it every 10 years after that. So 1800, 1810, 1820, 1830, 1840, 1850. Starting in 1850, you see every name in the household listed. Before that, like the 1840 census, you will only see the name of the head of the household. And then you have columns for kids 5 to 10, 10 to 20, you know, the different ages, little check marks. But in 1842, I believe it was 1842, the Department of the Interior was created in the United States. And Congress felt that rather than have U.S. Marshals do the census, is what they had been doing up to that point in time, they decided to let the Department of the Interior take over the census and do the census. So the Department of the Interior wanted every name in the household. So 1850 on, you have every name listed in the household. But you get to 1840 and all of a sudden you're going to see the head of the house, just the head of the households. So just a little bit on that. But this is Family Search. They did not used to require that you had a sign-in, registered for a sign-in, but now they do. So you have to get registered. And let me see where I'm at.
But it's free, so you
yeah, it's free. You just have to remember all your,
email and a password.
you have to remember your password.
Yeah. I gotta look up mine, because I don't remember what it is. It's been a while since I've been on it.
Oh, a little bit of history on censuses. If you're looking for, nobody in this room is related to it, but it's just kind of interesting. There are only 3 slave censuses prior to the Civil War. 1790, which was the first one, 1840 and 1860. And of course, if you read the Constitution, prior to the Civil War, slaves were considered 3/5 a person. So
3/5.
3/5 a person. So they did that to adequately put that number of representatives for the South. It had to do with how many House of Representatives the Southern states, the slave Southern states got prior to the Civil War. So it's just something of interest.
I wonder how they came up with that number.
I don't know. But it's interesting that Sherman, through his march through Georgia, used the census to go and find owners of slaves when he was going through Georgia. He used the census of 1860 to find slave owners' homes. So, a little bit of trivia.
And when they do the census, they don't go alphabetical order. They go, start on one street corner and go house to house, down the street, and then across the street, and then
I
down.
did the
And then
census.
back and forth, and so it's in your neighborhood. It's not, you can't look up George Burnham under the B's and find him, because you're gonna, yeah.
Well, we had only certain questions that we were allowed
And
to
everybody
ask.
does like, what, 6 blocks or something, you do all the houses in that area. And then somebody else has an area and somebody else has an area.
Was that a good experience for you?
Yes, it was.
Yeah,
Yeah, I really enjoyed it.
you got more people.
I wore out more shoes.
Oh, did you?
And if you notice on censuses, there's different questions every so many years.
Yeah,
too.
they change the questions up. The 1950 census is organized a little bit differently than previous censuses, but it still contains a lot of information for people searching it. Because genealogists love census, because it gives all the household members, and it gives, you know, dates, and, you know, you could find a census where, how long have you been a resident of this county? 3 years, and it's a kid. Well, that means they were in the county, being born in that county when, you know, it was done. So you can kind of pinpoint when your relatives moved into different places in the United States based on years in the census, which makes it kind of nice. Nice.
And then they have state censuses that are done 5 years after that. Their other ones are 1900, 1910, 1920, 1930, and the state ones are done in 05, 15, 25, 35.
You know, the different states, they're 5 years apart. Some of them will do them in 1912, 1917, 1922. The other ones will do 1915, 1920, so they're all different. in how
Was that
they-
because they knew there'd be more change in that than in the 10 years?
I think
Uh,
the state just wanted their own numbers.
Yeah, the state just
Yeah.
wanted the numbers, how, you know, what they had. To
So
do.
they could get state money?
Yeah, I doubt it. State doesn't give you anything. Okay, I'm gonna hand you out a couple things. I didn't get to talk to them, because we're running out of time here. One is, this is the Boise Family History Center. They have classes that they give, 3 classes. And so, I'll tell you what, I'll just hand them out, and you guys can take one and pass it around. And the other one is an Idaho research. So if you're researching people, if you have people here in Idaho, okay, these are excellent sources for Idaho research.
You could use Frank.
Okay.
Oh, I forgot also the Oregon Trail Association.
Same as
If anybody here has relatives that were on the Oregon Trail, the Oregon Trail Association has an excellent website. It has listing of all the wagon trains that left St. Joe, Missouri. And you can get a lot of information off of that site. I've used it, so I know it's not a paid site, but there is a Oregon Trail Association that you can join if you're, you know, a descendant of that. But they have some good information too, so.
So the archives that are in Idaho, they're at the old, next to the old penitentiary. They're in a brand new building. But you can access their information. In other words, you can access what information they have in the archives from your home. However, to actually go get the information, you have to go to the archives to look it up. But you can at least see, because they've got things from all over the country, you know, Massachusetts, you know, marriages from this date to this date, you know, just a whole bunch of different information that you can access from there.
So at what point, you seem like you would lead with that one? That
Idaho archives?
That, yeah,
If you have family here, I don't have any.
For Idaho.
So,
that's
Well-
the Idaho, but you said it covers all the states.
Yeah, they've got information at the archives all over the United States, information.
Both families.
So,
They all be in Sarah.
Because that'd be a fun place to work, because it's
yeah,
climatically controlled.
yeah, sure, yeah, yeah.
And you said it's by the
They seem
penitentiary?
Extremely helpful and
Yeah,
very
go by the
knowledgeable.
penitentiary.
What's it called?
Idaho State Archives.
Okay.
But they're on this flyer, in the sheet that I passed around.
When you start searching, should you pick just one line at a time to do, or?
Oh, that's a hard question. I would, I'm working on that line, so I'm familiar with dates and everything, I've got all those numbers in my head, and I can, oh yeah, this guy was born here, But you can do it however you want to do it. The next question becomes, okay, I'm researching my ancestors back. I get to my grandfather and my grandfather's wife. How much of the Weiss family do I want to do? You know what I'm saying? Because they're not really my relatives. So I don't usually do that, but other people do. So it just depends on how much you want to research.
And when I started, I wanted to go back as far as I had pictures. Because I didn't want to go back to kings and queens and Adam and Eve and all that baloney.
Well, you might have a castle.
I
in,
don't know any of those people, and I don't, so I wanted to go back as far as I had pictures. So when I finally got back to the last picture I had, I put in their names, and I got their weddings and stuff, and it asked who are your parents. So I got a bonus, I got an extra grandparent.
Now, I do have a challenge for you,
Uh-oh.
and I need you to start collecting this now. I had a gentleman in the Pikes Peak Genealogical Society who, he's probably 20 years younger than me, maybe 15. And he collected pictures of his his grandparents, his great-grandparents, and his great-great-grandparents. He was able to get all of those. So that put me on a quest. So I went out and I got all my grandparents, all my great-grandparents, and I got 11 out of 16 of my great-great-grandparents. So I throw that challenge out to everybody. Collect pictures, okay? See if you can see how far back you can go in your pictures, and try to get pictures of everybody that you can.
So do they have recognition software that does it? If you just have a picture but no name?
Good luck. That's what happened with my grandmother before she passed away. My mother and my aunt went back to Lincoln, and my grandmother had these 2 big boxes of pictures, and they only got through a box of pictures before she died, and nobody knows who these other people are in that other box of pictures. So, like, if you have somebody that's in their 75 or older, and they've got a box of pictures, sit down with them and have them write out the names.
My backstory is
the pictures don't mean anything unless they have a name attached to it.
I have an aunt. She has a room full of pictures. She's 80 years old. She calls herself the family historian, yet we don't know. She says, "Well, I'll send you all pictures," but she never has. But I wonder if she. What should I ask her to do?
Jessica, what do you have in mind for the folders?
Those, if anybody wants one to put all their
In the
paperwork in.
downstairs in their house in Boise before they passed away.